Hey fellow rock historians, when you think of the king of pop, you probably think of Michael Jackson, the gloved one. But in the mid-1980s, he had not yet ascended to the throne. There were plenty of contenders, like Duran from Duran Duran, A Flock of Seagulls, Eddie Murphy, the gay one from the bathroom, Cincinnati favorite, the Bangles, a little guy from a little band, Cocaine, Madonna, the lady with the messed up hair, the other lady, but the black one, Motley's Crew, John Cougar, John Mellencamp, John Cougar Mellencamp, John Cougar Darby, Melons, Camp Mellonton, Johnny Apple Melons, Rue McClanahan from the Golden Girls. They were in contention for the crown. But between 1983 and 1988, the crown could have very easily rested atop another man's head, one Bartholomew J. Lewis, aka Huey Lewis. And if that's news for you, strap in and get ready to earn your assistant PhD in rock on this week's episode of Assistant Professor of Rock. I was able to line up some of the top professors of Hueyology from the Ivy League to weigh in about the impact of Huey Lewis. We're fortunate enough today to have one of the most renowned international professors of Hueyology from Princeton sitting with us today. Thank you for joining us, Professor Randall Thompson. Talk to us a little bit about the impact of Huey Lewis.
Well, I would be delighted. I studied Huey Lewis in the news. This was probably in the early 2000s, but I was born in the 80s. Back then, he was, I don't know why they even said "and the news," because he was the news, but had things charted differently and other pop stars had not risen to fame. We'd be calling it Huey Stream Media or some kind of analog of this. You know, I was actually going to bring a chart, is a chart of Hueyology, not to be confused with Hueyology, like people that are obsessed with color, but Hueyology, not to be confused with proctology. Well, see, this is why I should have brought the chart. But either way, he was like, oh, I'm always at the bottom of things and things like this. And he just hated charts. One day he said, you know what? I'm going to be at the top of them. America loved his sound. And I think several other countries too. Botswana, Madagascar, which for a short time, whenever I Want a Brand New Drug came out, they actually changed their name temporarily to Gladagaskar. That's how happy they were. There's only one way to dodge a bullet, and that's with festive 80s butt rock.
Oh, cool. All right. We also had time to speak to the new maverick of Hueyology, the chosen one, the portly princess, the boy stud, the professor at Harvard University, Parker Tig, to weigh in about the impact of Huey Lewis. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor Tig.
Oh, well, let me stop you right there. Professor Tig was my father. You can just call me Mr. Tig.
Oh, cool. All right. So Mr. Tig.
I'm here to talk about the cultural impact that Hip to Be Square had on society. Now, I have a very privileged position in the Ivy League, and I was able to get my hands on never-before-seen footage of the studio recordings of Huey Lewis and the News.
It's incredible. So Mr. Tig.
And while they were writing what we now know as Hip to Be Square, they spent hours grueling about a way to write this song.
I know it personally changed.
See, it wasn't always called Hip to Be Square. They were trying to say it was hip to be a rhombus. It was hip to be a trapezoid, to not pay child support, drive under the influence of alcohol, illegally smuggle weapons into Soviet-aligned nations, taxes. And finally, one of the bandmates shouts out, "Huey, all these song titles are for a bunch of squares."
Oh, cool. All right. So Mr.
And
Tig.
Huey goes, "Oh, I think it's hip to be square." And
Oh, cool. All right. So Mr. Tig, Hip to Be Square. Phenomenal song.
I believe it to have impacted American culture, perhaps more than any other Huey Lewis and the News track.
Talk to us about the impact.
Well, Hip to Be Square did for squares what Queen's track Fat Bottom Girls did for Fat Bottom Girls. It changed the game.
I know it personally changed my life, Mr. Tig. And the communism, the fall of communism.
Gorbachev's obsession with Huey Lewis and the News, and specifically the track Hip to Be Squared, led him to not properly managing the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet economy, leading to its inevitable collapse. And when they realized that the Berlin Wall was actually a circle, they realized that wasn't hip at all, because of course it was hip to be square. And what's the opposite of a circle? A square.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But not everybody agrees with the stature of Huey Lewis. For a counterpoint, I spoke to Harvard's very own Clark Vladimir, the head of the musicology and print studies department over there.
But hey, what you doing? I told that hoe to be out of my house when I knew. Now you go ahead and get over there and tell that bitch to leave like I. Oh, hello.
Thank you so much, Professor Vladimir.
How you doing?
Thanks for sitting down with me. So tell me, you don't agree at all with the impact of Huey Lewis in the news, is that right?
Impact. Impact implies that something was impactful.
And so Huey Lewis was not impactful. Tell me more.
If Huey Lewis was impactful, that would be news to me.
From your perspective, what makes
Huey Lewis is known for being played at crappy sporting events and ruining We Are the World.
Talk to us about how he ruined We Are the World.
He's the worst part of. Just look at the video. Everything's going great. They get to Huey Lewis, and then Cyndi Lauper takes the whole song.
The impact of Lauper, like Lauper mania, was
Cyndi Lauper. Lop my goddamn ears off.
That's
I am sick and tired of you white boys propping up these mediocre music acts to bolster your own stats as a people. What did Huey Lewis do?
He made the news.
You know what didn't make the news? His album's on the chart.
What do you mean? He spent 17 weeks at #1 in Botswana.
All he did was make it cool for white boys to roll up the sleeves of their sport coats.
Well, he did have an album called Sports Coats. Originally, it was going to be called Sports Coats.
Does this man even know that you exist?
I would like to think that he's one of the.
I make my tenure off of Prince and Prince music. And you know the best part about that is?
What's that?
He can't contest it because he died. Is there some kind of liberal studies or something you could take up? A class for Michael Stipe lookalikes? What else could you possibly do?
Huey Lewis is just one facet of being an assistant professor of rock.
You sit here and bolster up Huey Lewis while I make my living, my livelihood off the studies of Mr. Prince Rogers Nelson, the greatest multi-instrumentalist and musical force of our lifetime. You gonna compare that to Huey Lewis? You know what? This is done. I'm leaving. Like I said, tell that bitch to get out of my house.
That was tense. We just had to go back in time on today's episode. But tune in next week when we discuss how Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch almost cured AIDS on the Assistant Professor of Rock.